Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Endurance Collective podcast. Today, you're listening to episode 10. We're going to be chatting about reaching people. If you don't know much about Endurance Collective, our heart and the vision of Endurance is to create community, make disciples, and reach people. And so today, I'm excited to have the opportunity to just share a little bit about the vision of Endurance and what we desire to see to take place through the collective. And no surprise, I have some returning guests here. I have with me Courtney, my wife, and Eli, my man. He's my guy, man. And I'm excited to have you guys back, man. I think it's so important that people hear, not only from me, but from people who embrace the same vision and have the same heart, man. And so thank you guys for always being a part of this podcast, and especially these episodes that really lean into who we are and what we desire to see in a ministry. And so thank you guys so much, and I know that you're going to continue to add value to this conversation today. Well, we're talking about that, reaching people. I think we've all kind of talked about that in different times of life and in ministry that we've had relationship together, and we all share that same heart of reaching people. And obviously that should be the heart of every Christian, right? It's like a tenet of the faith, right? Like, are you reaching people? Are you evangelizing? But a lot of that comes through just the way that we live our lives and the way that we pursue people. And so to start this conversation today, anytime, people ask me, or like I start to think about, like, how are we supposed to do that, right? Like, how are we supposed to reach people, or how are we supposed to make disciples? There's like no one better to go to than Jesus himself.
That's right,
man.
That's right.
That's right.
So it's kind of like one of those things. It's like, oh, well, this person says that, or this expert says this. I'm like, what does Jesus say? What did Jesus do? And so that's where I want to start today on this podcast. And I'm not going to read the whole story that I want to share today, but many of you probably know it. If you've been in the church at any time, you've probably heard this story. Eli was saying it's one of his favorites before we even jumped on here. But the story I want to point you to today is a story that you may know as the woman at the well. And it's a story where Jesus encounters a Samaritan woman, and he begins to share. He begins to evangelize. He begins to reach someone where they are. And so I want to read just a portion of this story today in John chapter 4, verse 4. I'm going to read through 10 to help just kind of get us started. This is in the NLT. It says this. It says, he had to go through Samaria on the way. Eventually he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. And Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. And soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. And she said to Jesus, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" And Jesus replied, "If you only knew the gift God has for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me, and I would give you living water." I think this story, obviously it continues, and I want to look at that further just from what you guys know about this story and how this encounter continues to play out. But this story, though, you read this story, and I think one of the things that you see, and even by the title of it, right, is the fact that Jesus is for everyone.
Yeah, that's right.
I was actually, in reading this story too, we just read John chapter 4. You go back to John chapter 3, and there's a different story. It's an encounter with not this Samaritan woman, but a man, and his name is Nicodemus. Mm-hmm. And they come from two different worlds. Nicodemus is a Jew. He's a religious guy. Like he's someone of high class. He's someone that is he has a place in this world, if you would. And then very next chapter, we get an encounter and a story about a woman who here in the very opening part of the text, right, is saying we should have nothing to do with each other. Yep. And, you cannot dismiss that, right? It's intentional, not only by the writer God himself in providing us a outline and a blueprint as to what evangelism should be and who the gospel should be for. And that's for everyone. And so I love this story, and I love the fact that Jesus continuously just smashes social norms.
Yeah.
Like cultural differences. And so that's kind of where I want to start this conversation and bring you guys in, because and I'll share this personally from me real quick. One of my favorite experiences that I've ever had, and that I continue to have, is on any type of mission trip or any type of evangelism or service efforts that I've had outside of who I am and who I'm comfortable with, right? And so, for instance, I'll give an example. One of the coolest things that I've gotten to experience is, like, for instance, being in Haiti. Oh, yeah. And serving in Haiti and really just connecting with people. And one of the first lessons that I really learned is that, man, God's love and the gifts that God has given us, it goes beyond language barriers.
Yeah, absolutely.
It goes beyond
so good.
These differences that we experience in our daily lives, right? Because, like, I'm telling you, I watched God move through people I could not even communicate with.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I watched God touch people's lives and in my own life and my own faith in return, right? And so that has always been one of the coolest experiences for me, to be able to walk into somewhere where it's like, I can't even communicate to you, but
Wow.
I'm telling you this, God's working through this moment. God's working through hearts that are turned to him, which we also see in this story about worshiping in spirit and in truth. It's like, it doesn't matter when we turn our focus onto who really matters. And so as we think about that, how have you guys seen, maybe it's, culturally, like I just mentioned, right? Beyond the United States or missions or whatever, right? Maybe it's just cultural in general, because culture has also changed here here in America.
Big time.
And is continuing to change, right? So, how have you seen culture change, I guess? And what are some new ways that we as the church, we as a ministry, can maybe reach people?
That's a good one. I feel like you're right. Like, we're talking about the culture, kind of piggybacking off of what you were saying with the culture. I think sometimes when we take a look at this story, you're like, how can we relate what it was like to be a Samaritan in those days, and what was it like to be a Jew? I mean, I think there's kind of you can almost kind of draw a contrast, or a comparison, I should say, in being like you said, when you go on a mission trip and we're Americans. And, they feel like, and I'm just using that as an example, like when you do go, like when we did go to Haiti, they were like, you're Americans, why are you here? I had someone ask me, why are you even here? We don't mean anything to you. We're nothing.
Wow.
We don't, like, why? And so I kind of feel like that's kind of almost like probably a way maybe the Samaritan woman was feeling, kind of like, you're a Jew.
Yeah.
Why?
They didn't like each other.
Yeah. Why? Yeah. Why are you even here? Like, there's nothing I can offer you. There's nothing I can give you. We don't talk to each other. Yeah. We don't do things together. And Jesus is trying to, like, show that point right there of like how he's for everyone. The Spirit, that we are all mankind. We're not supposed to be divided in that nature, in that respect. But unfortunately, we live in a broken world, and it was like that. So I think that was a good contrast, just kind of piggybacking off of that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think looking at today's culture, man, everything is so driven by technology.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
I'm in the technology world, right? So I see this, but I look at, like, what we're doing today, a podcast, right? This is a way we're able to connect with our community. You look at different things like, what do you call it? Zoom, like Zoom meetings, right? You see people getting together over Zoom calls more than they ever have before, right? Our business operates in that way. We do business nationally. We don't have a lot of customers here locally in DFW, but we do business all over the country.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's over like a Teams video call. The fear of that for me personally is, I'm a big believer in getting up close and getting hands on people, just a smile.
Absolutely.
Things that it doesn't translate very well sometimes over, this type of platform, right? And so that's my hope and prayer with the church and people like us, man, is that we don't lose sight of what it means to get close. One of my favorite quotes, man, and as we were preparing and studying for this, It's from Lecrae, the Christian hip hop artist.
Yeah.
But he said you can impress people from a distance, but if you really want to make a difference, get up close.
Get up
That's
close.
good.
Amen.
He's just talking about it has to be something that's personal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can't agree more with you too, like talking about the technology front, right? It's kind of, matter of fact, I was watching, or it was like a short video, but it was essentially going over, I think it was like the last maybe 20, 30 years of where we spend our time, right? And it's not anything like necessarily like ministry related. Church was in there towards the bottom, still towards the bottom, unfortunately. But what it was doing was showing where we as people share our time and how that has changed over time. And it was giving it in a percentage based. And it was like something like 73% of our time is spent online. And like
Believe it.
it's crazy, right? Like it's unbelievable. And so, talking about these things, it kind of leads me into the next point I want to talk about that we see here in this story though, is while yes, like we got to get up close and we have to create opportunities for in person.
Well.
Yeah, you've got to leverage it and you have to do what Jesus did, which is what? Meet people where they are.
That's right.
And
That's right.
if that's where people are, how do we do that, right? Like how do we do that? And so that was one of the things. I love what you guys are saying, but the next thing that we see Jesus do is that he meets someone where they're at. Yeah. And if you read this story, you know that this woman is going at a kind of an awkward time in the day. Yep. She's intentional in why she's going to the well. She's the only one there. That means that everyone else isn't there, right? And so this encounter is divine. I mean, there's no question about it. Jesus was intentional in this encounter, this whole story, right? It was is meant for a purpose. But what I love is that Jesus connects with her and connects with people where they are. Yep. And that to me is an incredible thing to see. And I've seen it time and time again. As we talk about reaching people, that's why I think what you said is so important, because we have to reach people where they are. We have to reach the next generation where they are. And for so long, I've seen that happen. And even in church, right? I've been in the church and around church long enough where you see that hesitance from maybe like older generations where it's like, no, we ain't doing that. No, we ain't going there. No, we're not going to do that. And some from wisdom, but other from just pure reluctance to meet people where they are and to reach a generation where they are. So I couldn't agree more, man, that I think that it's so important that we keep that at the forefront of who we are as a ministry, and not only a ministry, but in Christian faith, of being willing to meet people where they are, not changing the message, but changing the way that we might deliver it, or the avenues in which we take to get the message there. And so I think that's incredibly important. The other thing, though, that you see here is that this woman, there's obviously a misunderstanding. She doesn't understand, right? Yeah. She doesn't understand what Jesus is trying to offer. It doesn't make sense to her in the moment. She is talking about a physical need being met through thirst, and Jesus is trying to get her to understand a spiritual need that can be met of a living water. It's this idea of providing this living water that can sustain you and satisfy you for all eternity through who he is and the person of Jesus. And so, as we look at our world today and we talk about meeting people where they are, I want to ask you guys, how have you maybe shared this truth, right? This truth of who Jesus is with compassion and love when it comes to sharing faith, where you've been able to maybe it's you, maybe it's an experience that you've had, maybe it's something that you've seen in a ministry that you're in or your church. How have you guys been able to share that truth with compassion and meet people where they are?
Yeah, I'll share about that. I was thinking about this a lot from when you kind of showed the outline and the topics we're going to be talking about today. It really, Chrissy and I have lived this in our ministry. It's a simple equation. People ask, what's your secret sauce, right? When you're having a little bit of success, different things. They're like, hey, what are you doing to have this kind of success? And it's really three things, man. And the first word is a word I've heard you use probably a handful of times already, but it's intentional. Yep. You have to be intentional. The second is authenticity.
Oh my gosh, yes.
People can sense
When you're not real.
When you're not real.
They can sense nonsense. I
Yeah,
like that.
they can sense nonsense.
That's good.
That's good.
Especially we work with students, right? Like they have like a nonsense radar. I mean, if it's not real, they're gonna call you out and they're gonna be like, dude.
Well, you talk about that. I mean, like I've heard that too. You know, we reference all these studies and stuff. I don't know where they come from, but anyway, one of the things you hear a lot though with this younger generation now is like they want authenticity.
They want authenticity.
That's what they want.
That's it. And then the third thing I would say is consistency.
Yeah.
And so you see that here in the story with Jesus, man. He was intentional. There's a word in there. I preached a sermon over this one time, but it said he had to go through Samaria.
Yep.
But if you actually look at the route that traditionally they would take from Judea to Galilee, he didn't have to go through Samaria.
Yeah.
And I think those two words had to speak to the intentionality. Jesus was on a mission. He was focused. He knew there was somebody that needed something. And so he intentionally goes out there and meets her.
Absolutely.
When you look to authenticity, like he just loved on this lady. I
love that.
He didn't condemn her. He didn't try to, shove the gospel down her throat. He just connected with her.
Yeah.
And so in our ministry, man, like me, I'm into a couple things that students are into. I love shoes, as everybody knows.
Yep.
Sunday kicks, #Sunday kicks. Second thing is I love video games. Dude, I'm going to game till I die. But what's cool about that is I can connect with students, and it's authentic because I do have a personal interest in those things.
Yeah.
But man, start talking to them, connect, and I just love just hearing about their interests and the things that they're involved in. And so it's real. And then if you're not consistent with it, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
One interaction is not going to make a difference. It doesn't apply to the story of the woman at the well, just because Jesus went in, kind of did his thing and moved on. But in our everyday ministry, it has to be consistent if you truly want to make a difference in people's lives. You have to show not only that you're interested in the moment, but then follow up. Hey, checking in on you. How are things going? Hey, I wanted to connect. Let's go grab a coffee or lunch or something like that. And so that formula for me, man, is how up close and personal we've actually made this concept a reality of how we do things.
That's good. And I love that, how you're saying like the sensing the no nonsense and just being real and authentic. I think about that too, is that like just sitting down with people, and like you were kind of saying, like it's not about necessarily just preaching and just like almost like condemning people. Mm-hmm. It's about just being right there in their moment, in their struggle. It's not about in that, and also kind of in the no nonsense too, kind of, on both sides of that. It's like I've had people before come to me and almost like instead of coddling them with, oh, well, of course Jesus loves us, and of course, people are forgiven, and we all believe that. But I also think that there's almost this level of expectation that people actually have of Christians and believers. They almost want, kind of like a toddler that's throwing a fit that needs discipline, and they want that little bit. They want someone to be like, hey, you're bro, like bring it back together. Yeah. I've actually had encounters like that too, where people I know are coming to me. They're asking me for advice, but they're asking me in a way because they kind of want someone to reel them in a little bit. They don't want nonsense. They don't want to be like, oh, you know what? You just do you. Yeah. You just keep doing you. You know what they want? They want me to sit there and have, the integrity and the intentionality of like, hey, you know what? I hear what you're going through, but that's not the way you should be doing this. Yeah. It's almost like kind of like that no nonsense, like, and I just think that was really cool, just hitting off that and like the formula, like you talk about. It goes in so many different routes, and actually that kind of leads right into, which maybe I'm getting ahead of us here, but like kind of what Jesus' response to her was about her husband's. I mean, he didn't like, listen, sweetie, you know what? You just have had a really tough life, and you were completely warranted, and this was condoned in every aspect. No, he was like, actually, no, girl, you've had a lot. No, but he wasn't condemning her in that. He was just being real. Yeah. It was no nonsense. There was no fluff. It was authentic. I came here for a reason. I have something to talk about, and it's through love and compassion. And he starts with humbling himself below her. Hey, you just give me a drink. Good. Give me a drink. He put himself beneath her in a way for a moment, sitting by the well. She's standing there, and he looks up. Please give me a drink. And that was his way of like breaking that barrier. And that's when she was like, what? Yeah. And then he just hits her with authenticity, no nonsense, and intentionality. I think that's amazing. What you're saying.
No, I agree. And I mean, literally talking about what you're kind of leading into, I think that right there is loving compassion, right? Because you're right. I mean, like he meets this woman where she's at, and I think what you're saying is key to evangelism and what people are hungry for and need. Yeah, it's not like this like ultimate authority. I'm
No.
over you. Let me tell
No,
you
he
how to
started
do
beneath
it.
her.
Let me tell you what's wrong. Yeah, Jesus himself. That's why I say it's so important
Yeah.
Not
to
only
not
spiritually,
listen
but physically.
to all these, experts and I'm not Christian leaders who say they have the secret sauce or the answer, right? No.
Yeah.
Jesus is the answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jesus showed
the
us
blueprint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He showed us humble yourself.
That's right.
And approach people with compassion and love. And I think what you're saying though is so key and is so necessary to evangelism and what people need today. Because you're right, Jesus meets her, and I was going to kind of use this to play the devil's advocate with you guys because you're like, oh, Jesus didn't condemn. Well, some people might see what he said next as condemning because he says, hey, bring me your husband.
And then he's like, actually,
You got 5, and the one you're with is not
Right.
the one.
Exactly.
Yeah. So like he's calling out and speaking truth, but why? It's to bring her to revelation of who he is.
Yeah.
And that's love.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's compassion. And that's the same that's the same compassion and love that I want to be marked with and that I want Endurance Collective to go in. It's one that provides people with a pathway to who Jesus is and living a life that provides the living water in which Jesus speaks about, who is himself, who is the Holy Spirit that will dwell within, that gives us eternal life.
Well, I was just saying one thing that I kind of thought about while he was sitting there talking about the intention. It's the heart behind the intention, because I have seen throughout my 30 whatever years now, we won't go into the specifics on that, but seriously, throughout my life so far, I have seen the difference of the heart behind the intention. So, we do preach about being intentional,
Yeah.
but have you ever encountered Christians when their intention, their heart is to come at you with like this, almost this condemnation, like, you know what, you're wrong, you shouldn't be doing this, and again, it's not from a place of love and understanding, it's from a place of like you were saying, of bringing in to draw near. Whenever you're holding someone accountable, it's like a magnet. That when you're holding someone accountable and when you're being intentional in the right heart, it should actually magnetize them closer to you, closer to Jesus. Not this place where it's repelling.
Yeah.
Because if you're not in the right heart, it's going to be like, polar opposites where it's not going to try, or no, I guess the same to same, it's going to just completely separate completely.
The word says it's his kindness that leads us to repentance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I've always just chosen to operate with no judgment on people.
Yeah.
Because when people come to me with stuff, they're like, hey, I'm going through this, I'm struggling with this. I'm like, dude, no judgment, bro. We all struggle with different things.
Yeah.
Like maybe you're coming to me with this, but I struggle with this. And we have a conversation and it's real, it's authentic, it's consistent, it's all that stuff, right? And so, yes.
I love that. Absolutely.
Yeah. I love this conversation in general because I think it's so needed. People need to hear it. People want to hear it, and people
check their heart whenever they're being intentional. Just make sure you're checking yourself.
Yeah.
Not in fear of doing the right thing, but just in like reverence of bringing people truly to Jesus and in that heart.
And truly being inclusive with the gospel, man.
that's good
Because
too.
if you start making people feel condemned or judged, then you're excluding them.
Ooh,
Yeah.
And that's not what Jesus did.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what the world and the enemy would want people to believe about Christianity. You hear that all the time, right? It's exclusive. No, it's actually very inclusive. It's the most inclusive faith in the world. I would
You always
argue.
see like all or everyone.
Yeah.
Or it's like it's very inclusive.
This actually just reminded me of like just at work the other night. I was, sitting there at 3 a.m. and my delusion of like what's happening. And I just happened to pick up on a conversation and somebody was saying to this girl, she's like young girl, she's like trying to find like a man in her life. And she said that the guy said something about like, oh, well, we can meet up, but I just want it to be super like casual. Like, I don't want to go in with any expectations. I just want to meet you. And then, and it was like a very like respectable thing, the way he was like saying, like, I guess through their dating app or whatever. And someone else like commented and was like, oh, I bet he's a Christian because he doesn't want like in a way oh, he's just not even look like he's trying to be like better than you, like holier than thou. It sounds like he's so holier than thou, like he doesn't even want to be real with you. And I'm like, golly, where are we at today where someone that just wants to like be respectable and be like, hey, I don't want to go in with expectations of anything. I just want to like meet you. Let's just get to know each other, and then, someone literally is judging him for that. And it turns out she's like, well, he does go to church. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like we've literally like created this like hashtag condemnation equals Christian. Like, I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Anyway, that just reminded me. I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. That's the narrative of like the world.
Yeah,
towards
absolutely. And it'll always be used, right?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Unfortunately, because the world doesn't always accept truth. It doesn't always accept who Jesus is. But here's the truth. The truth will set you free. Yeah. And that's what we read about here in this entire story. And kind of going into our next topic with that, right? The truth will set you free. The truth sets this woman free.
That's right.
And as I read this story, I've preached sermons on this story too. But one of the things that has always caught just my thoughts in studying this and reading this, even praying through it, right, is the fact that at the end of the story, the woman leaves her jar.
I love that. That's one of my favorite things.
Isn't it amazing?
It's like he initially went there with a purpose, but then ended up not even like fulfilling the purpose.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's just crazy.
Yeah, it speaks to how
Jesus gave her a new purpose.
Right, he gave her a new purpose. He put into perspective what really matters, and I think that's what we need
huge.
In this culture today, right? And in our faith, it's like, no, like what really matters. And Jesus says, hey, listen, I get you're thirsty, you want to drink, but that won't actually fulfill you. Yeah. That purpose will not actually take you into the next one. Yeah. And so I love that part of the story where we see Jesus reveal truth. He says, listen, I am the way, I'm the life, like I am the truth, right? Yeah. And he gives this to her. She walks away from her water jug, and then what you see is something that I believe should be. I guess I would just call it the results of effective evangelism. Yeah, and that is that yes, she leaves her jar, but next she goes into the town and says, "Come and see." Oh my gosh. She says, "There's a man. There's a man that knows. He knew everything about me. He revealed himself as the Son of Man." Actually, I take that back. He doesn't say Son of Man here. In Scripture, you read oftentimes Jesus would be doing his thing. He'd be doing Jesus things, miracles, and everything else.
Just
right?
Being Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And he would often refer to himself as Son of Man. But here he actually kind of. He reveals himself as who he is. He's like, I am he. I'm the Messiah. I'm the Messiah. And he doesn't say that. I had it in my notes.
Was that the first time?
I don't know if it's the first time.
He reveals himself as Messiah.
Yeah, and he does so partly because of the culture and the context around it, right? She's a Samaritan, right? He's not dealing with all these religious people that think they're high and pious and, they're going to revolt against him for all these things, right? But he's speaking to this woman and he reveals himself as the Messiah. And here's this woman who hears it, leaves what she initially came for, goes back to her town, to her village, and says, come and see. There's a man. His name is Jesus. And for me, that speaks to the effectiveness of who Jesus is, right? We know Jesus is Jesus. He's going to do Jesus things. But it also speaks to the way in which Jesus presented it. And I think that's what we take away from it. Yeah. Yes. As Christians, as a ministry, that's what I want. I want to take that part away from it that says you need to meet people where they are. Yeah. You need to be intentional. You need to have compassion and love. You need to speak truth. And you need to reveal who he is and who Jesus is. And, the rest is up to him.
That's the gospel right
That's
there.
That's
it. In my notes when I preach this, I only preached one sermon on this though, but the third point was the exchange, which is exactly what you mentioned. Yeah. There's so much imagery you can pull from that, man, like the water jug. Like, I don't know if you guys have watched The Chosen, but like when they would go to the wells, I mean, like they had these poles with the two jugs, and they're heavy and they're burdened. And I can imagine when you fill them up with water, they're probably even heavier.
God. Oh, yeah.
But then she leaves with no jug. So to me, that's symbolic of like, weary, heavy burden, right? But then she leaves with no weight on her shoulders at all, free. And that's the gospel, man. There's an exchange that happens when you give your life to Christ, man. We carry so much baggage with us. And if you look, you can hear people's stories of like what they were going through before they met Jesus and then how they are today, right? And sometimes we're not all perfect. We make mistakes, but still, man, there is some kind of a peace, a comfort of
That's
knowing
right.
who Jesus
That's
is
right.
as Savior in your life.
Yep.
Yeah.
That just takes away all the burdens of the world, man. So
That is so
I
good.
love that story of the exchange, man.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
good.
last point, I think it's huge.
That's amazing. Well, we talk about this whole story, right? So I want to kind of focus in now towards the Endurance Collective and talking about reaching people, right? Obviously, our heart is to reach people and to reach people where they're at. Like you were saying, a big part of the Endurance Collective is to kind of branch out beyond just the local church and the way that the local church reaches people, but to reach people in different methods, and then to reach the broader church in bringing the church together. But in what ways do you guys envision Endurance Collective kind of participating in evangelism and reaching people, whether this be future, whether it be something we have already done that you have seen make an impact, or maybe it's a dream or a part of the vision that you want to share now? Do you guys have anything to add towards that?
I mean, for sure, like even now, just sitting and talking about it, getting people to hear us and our hearts and like what we want, what our vision is, kind of like that intentional, like, hey, I mean, I know there's like a lot, like, unfortunately, we want so bad to just take the world by, by the horns, or so to speak, and just like let's go. But I mean, there is a cadence to it, right? And even if we're not able to just run out there and just fill Dickie's arena just yet, I mean, I love though just here in this moment, like letting people hear the heart of the collective, like you said, and I think that's really important because it's building rapport with people and building rapport with like not only other Christians but people that maybe aren't believers yet. I want them to hear like our hearts behind it. And even something that kind of stuck out to me whenever we were talking about the exchange with Jesus and and everything else. I was like, it just kind of hit me. I was like, man, you know what? He did all that in a matter of what? How long do y'all think that conversation was? I mean, if you had to kind of guess, maybe 20 minutes, 10,
Yeah.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, I know scripture may leave some things out, as far as like the, complete, details of everything. But I mean, I'm sitting there thinking like, wow, look at how much impact in a short amount of time. And so I think that it's really important to kind of remember that even like through the collective or even just in your own personal lives, like you don't have to just know the whole world. You don't have to have the Bible memorized to be able to just like have a short, true, authentic interaction with somebody. And even like moments like in the podcast, moments like at our worship nights and things like that. Of course, I hope we can also develop more content as we go, just based on what the people want, the needs, and whatever God leads us in. But like I wanted to show that too, is that like these big, huge impacts are short. It's these small, tiny morsels of time. And then like, I guess I can just spin off that real quick. I actually, again, at work, I had a lady. She came up to me. Well, this was, first of all, she came to me a couple of years, it was about 2 years ago. She's a nurse and we were just talking and she just starts like telling me about her life, and she just has like a lot going on. And I was busy, but I just stopped. I just paused. I was like, you know what? I'm going to pause. I'm just going to listen to her. And so I'm listening to her. And then I just was like, you know what? I just feel like I'm supposed to tell you that like, it's going to be okay. And that you do have a support group. And God's here for you, and He's here for you. And she just starts bawling, and I said, "Come here." So we went into the linen closet where we have patients, like they're literally all this, and there's like towels and like gowns and like stuff we used to clean patients up with. And I just said, "Come in here." So I walked in there with her, and I just said, "I would just want to pray with you." Awesome. There's not a whole lot I can necessarily do right now in this moment for you, but I want you to know that as a Christian, that God's here with you. And I want to pray with you. And I took maybe 5 minutes and I prayed with this woman. And then as time's gone on, it's been about 2 years now. I left that job, but I came back recently. And when I came back, the first thing she said to me is she said, "I'm so glad you're back." She said, "You know what? I've never forgotten.
Man.
I've never forgotten those 5 minutes that you took for me." She goes, she says, "I think about that almost every single day when I'm going through it." And I was like, whoa, I took 5 minutes out of my day. I listened to her and I went and prayed with her. And I was truly authentic about it. I stopped and I paused. And it's like things like these moments that is so encouraging. And it just shows like I didn't have to spend 3 hours and like deep scripture and trying to give exhortations and exegetical speeches to her all and preach some sermon and drag her to church. I mean, don't get me wrong, yes, she absolutely needs to be in church and be surrounded with that. But it just took a moment. And I just hope that the collective can provide moments.
Yeah.
And that we can just keep providing these little just snapshots of time, even if it's that small, that the collective can do that. And I want to encourage people out there that you are capable. That's all you need is a snapshot, just a moment in time. And that picture, that little snapshot will resonate in memories and minds for years and years and years to come. And that is what a seed is.
Yeah.
And that's how it grows.
I would say, man, I feel like we're doing it. I have to be real selective with the things that I do. Not that I'm anybody important or anything, but it's like, I have a full-time job.
Yeah.
I have ministry.
Full-time family.
And family as
Husband,
well. Yeah.
dad.
And that's all important. And so the things that I do outside of all that, I have to be selective. And the reason that I've chosen to do this and the reason I love doing this is because we're touching lives.
That's right.
So this is cool, right? And I'm kind of going to talk out of both sides of my mouth. So earlier I said the technology, I don't want it to ever take the place, but it is important, right? Like people tune into the podcast, they get encouragement, or maybe they're not local to us, so they can't really connect with us in person. But this is just one avenue. I don't think this is ever going to be what Endurance Collective is. It's not just a podcast.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It's about going out in the community, doing the worship nights like we do. And in the worship nights, we've been very intentional. Those of you that have served with us, in our conversations, we say, hey, before, we're going to go early, we're going to rehearse, but then in that break between rehearsal and when it starts, go out and meet the people, right?
Yeah.
Go just talk to people, love on people.
talk.
We're very intentional about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the same like with serve days, right? Go look at our page and stuff. The serve days, we're meeting people where they are. We're meeting
right.
their needs. We're trying to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and who knows what else we might be doing in the future. But I see us putting ourselves in more positions to where we can hear people's stories, where we can pray with people, more stuff like what you did in a linen closet. And
Literally.
I love that story because I've had people tell me, hey man, there was this one time we talked about this and it just changed my life. And I'm like, that was one conversation.
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, right?
Yeah.
But it's like you cannot measure the impact of some of the things that you might quote unquote think are little.
Yep.
They actually have a significant impact on people's lives. So I really feel as a collective team, man, not to pat ourselves on the back or whatever, but that's why I do this. That's why I do this with pride, is because I feel like we are doing our best and making an effort to touch people. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
I love that.
I love it too, man. Providing those moments, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I think especially Eli, you just kind of mentioned it as well, but I think one of the ways that we can reach people, we're talking about reaching people. I think immediately when we start talking about reaching people, at least in the church, we start thinking outside of the church, which is great, and serve days and introducing people to Jesus. But one of the other purposes of Endurance Collective is to reach the church. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is reaching those that are serving in their local church and in other ministries where they might feel the burden of that, because the truth is that there's a real burden that comes along with ministry. There's a time burden, there's a spiritual burden that you carry for those that you are responsible for, and there's a lot of things that come with it. And sometimes it's a blessing, but listen, I've been in it, man, and I know it can also be a lot. We'll say that it can be a lot, and so one of the ways that we want to reach people is by reaching the church.
That's right.
And reaching leaders and reaching people who are dedicated to the call of ministry, where they can show up, man, to these whatever we have, whether it's a serve day or worship night, and they can have their moment.
Yeah.
That's
and
right.
they can be refreshed. They can be renewed.
They can be filled up again.
They can be filled up
They're
with
in a constant
living
state of
water,
pouring
man.
themselves out,
Living
right?
water.
So
Yeah.
we're gonna help fill them up.
Absolutely.
Let them ask for a drink.
And connect with other people. I think that's one of the things I love too. Is that
network.
it's a network that's not limited to your denomination or not limited to a certain viewpoint that maybe you've been limited to because of the church you go to, the leadership you're under. There's tons of different reasons why you might be limited or not be able to connect with people the way that you would be able to if you participated or joined us at the collective. So
I love that, because there's no lines in heaven. There's not going to be
No.
this territory and this territory. It's not going to be a map of heaven. It is supposed to be like no borders. There were no borders in heaven, and so I think you're right, like in how y'all were both saying, like, I think sometimes the Christians, we kind of tend to like, or once people do get saved or they're living the faith, we're kind of okay, we just kind of push them over in a corner. Okay, done, check, you're saying who's else is out there, but then it's like we can't forget about those people who are like you said, sharing that load and carrying the burden, and golly, we're all just humans. We're just humans trying to make it in this world, and that goes for Christians and non-Christians.
Well, and together we're stronger.
Amen.
Like I think about when we went to go help that ministry deliver the food and stuff. They were like, "Dude, we got this done so much quicker." I love it. We came with the squad, and man, that's what it's all about. You know, it's coming along aside each other and helping each other out, even in our personal lives, man. Like, I have the benefit of working in an environment where it's a Christian work environment as well, but going through stuff, man. Like, we've had a rough go. We were looking back at our life over the last 2 years. We've lost like 5 family members and like 2 loved family pets, right? And just here recently, Chrissy had lost her grandmother on her mom's side, and then like the next week we lost Lulu, our last family pet. And just the support, man, just from being in a community of believers and people, we help each other through life, man. That's right. And sometimes we might actually be out there, and I've mentioned this to some people I've been talking to over the last couple of weeks, but sometimes when we're hurting and we're pouring out of ourselves still throughout that hurt, it's like God just refills you in those moments too. And so I love just being around people, man. I will not shut up. I appear shy at first a lot of times. And once I get to know you, it's like I won't shut up because I truly get interested in people, man. Like I love connecting with people more than anything. Like I love worship, and that's my connection with God and everything. But as far as on this earth and having a role and responsibility, it's like pastoring people. It's loving on people. It's just connecting with people and just getting to know them, man. And so it's so pumped. I'm so pumped, man.
Me too, man.
I'm just ready to go, man. Can we go?
Let's go.
Let's go. Let's go. Well, hey, thank you guys so much for just sharing your heart and just giving, your take on reaching people and how we're going to do that as a ministry. I hope that the Endurance Collective can be an encouragement to every person who comes to our event, serves alongside us, partners with us, however you do it, man. There's so many ways that you'll have the opportunity to connect with us, and we want to make those opportunities, create those moments so that ultimately we can reach people. That's right. That's the vision: create community, make disciples, reach people, and that's what we're going to move forward in. So thank you guys so much again. Thank you for all those who are watching or listening, however you're intaking this, however you're being a part and listening or watching, man. I want to say thank you, and I want to encourage you, hey, we have some things that are coming up. We're about to turn the calendar on a new year, and I'm going to be believing and praying that God is going to make 2025. Sounds weird even saying it. 2025, man, just a year
coming alive
of
in 25,
growth.
guys.
Yes, right. Coming alive in 25.
Alive in
I like
25.
it. But man, I'm just praying that God would just expand what Endurance Collective is able to do in this new year. And hopefully there's going to be an opportunity for you to gather with us very, very soon. So, hey, be sure that you're checking out our website, endurancecollective.life. You can visit us on all of our social media. We're posting content there. We're posting events so that you can be a part. But more than anything, help us spread the message of the gospel. Help us share truth. Help us point people to the living water that is Jesus. And let's make a difference in this world. God bless you. Until next time, stay blessed. We'll see you very, very soon.